Welcome to Drumbeats, the must-listen-to podcast which explains why Indigenous partnerships are the key to securing successful outcomes in natural resource and infrastructure investment in Canada. I'm Mark Magnacca, and my co-host Robert Brant and I are joined today by John Paul Gladu, JP to many of his friends, board member of the recently announced Indigenous Advisory Council that's part of Mark Carney's push for Building Canada. He is also the principal of Mokwateh. JP discussed his unique background as an Indigenous leader who bridges traditional Indigenous life with modern corporate leadership. He shared his journey from his Anishinaabe roots in Thunder Bay, Ontario, to becoming president and CEO of the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business, where he developed programs to support Indigenous entrepreneurs. He also spoke about his new role on the Indigenous Advisory Council for the Major Projects Office. He emphasized the importance of direct engagement with Indigenous communities and highlighted successful examples, such as Enbridge's collaborative work with the First Nations in Alberta. He encourages overseas investors to engage directly with Indigenous leaders to gain a deeper understanding of ground-level perspectives, and highlighted the transformative impact of Indigenous leadership on not only Canada's resource development sector, but the economy as a whole.
John Paul, or JP, Gladu, great to have you with us on Drumbeats. Really nice to see you again.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, great to have you with us, JP. So, JP Gladu, a well-known name in Canada and to a number of overseas investors, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about who you are, your background, where you are at the moment. As you know, we're speaking to an audience who's overseas, who's not as familiar as Canada as some of us, and probably don't know the best places to hunt moose.
Thanks for that. Today I'm in Coast Salish territory in Vancouver. And, it takes as long to fly across our country as it does to fly across the ocean to visit you guys, to kind of give you a perspective of how big this country is. My friends call me JP. If I'm called John Paul, then it's usually my dad yelling at me. So I know I'm in trouble. So we'll stick with JP. I'm Anishinaabe, which means Ojibwe in kind of English, and I'm First Nation. I grew up in Thunder Bay. My dad was a logger. My grandfather was a logger. My other grandfather worked in the Trans-Canada pipelines, building those. I became a forester, and then an MBA, and then an Institute for Corporate Directors. I'm a director on a number of publicly traded boards, and an advisor to some global companies like BHP as an example, or Domtar, global forest products company. I grew up, these aren't my typical hunting clothes, as you might imagine, but I grew up in the bush. And there's a saying in Canada, and at least in our community as Indigenous people, walking two worlds. And that means that, I spend a lot of time on the land, but I also spend a lot of time in boardrooms in the cities. I prefer to be on the land with the animals most of the time because they're more predictable. But I really love the dual role of my life. One of the proudest moments, actually, last year, my daughter was 20. She's 21 now. She harvested her first moose, just the two of us. One shot, she got her done, and she was so incredibly impressive. She field dressed that moose. I mean, I helped, but she did 80% of the work, and she skinned. And then this moment I was overcome with just pure pride and joy and love, because when my dad came to see us, I might get a little emotional here, to see the moose. And for me to carry that knowledge that my father, who's a chief of my community,
who I had the pleasure of meeting earlier.
You did, Rob.
You
did.
JP.
You did.
Yeah. What a great guy.
And so you get a sense of the presence that man has as a 73-year-old leader himself. And for him and my daughter to be butchering a moose together. And I was just the rapper, not like a song rapper, but like the guy rapping the moose meat. And then kind of looking around about the economic activity that we've had in our community. I've been a strong advocate for the inclusion of Indigenous people in the natural resources. And I used to be the president and CEO of the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business for nearly 8 years. I sit on, I mentioned, a board, Suncor, Canada's largest integrated oil and gas company, Superior Plus propane across the country and the States. I'm just so grateful to be in the position that I'm in, to be able to be at the table like folks like yourself, having these deep conversations, because now is the time in Canada. Now is the time of the Indigenous position, the Indigenous thoughts, the Indigenous leadership. I'm sure we'll get into some conversation about what that looks like, because it is transforming our country. They're not without challenges, but certainly for your listeners over the pond, I think we really need to pay attention to this issue, because you're going to get it unfiltered from Indigenous people rather than just listening to investors or mining companies or energy companies. You need to listen to the people that are actually on the ground every day. So I really appreciate you gentlemen taking the time with me.
Our pleasure, JP. And I don't know where to begin, except maybe you mentioned the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business. You were president, CEO for, was it 8 years? How did you
Nearly
end up there? Talk a little bit about your time at CCIB. I'm a proud member of the board of directors today, and I've admired the growth and the way the CCIB has evolved over the years, and you were a big part of that.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Rob. It's one of those things. I worked for my own First Nation. I worked across the country, doing a lot of forestry, doing energy projects. I was actually working for my own First Nation at the time. I had just finished my executive MBA at Queen's, and the role came up. And I knew who Clint Davis was. Actually, I was friends with his wife. And I hope he gets to see this, him and Hillary, because I like his wife better. Clint is an incredible leader in Canada. He leads Cedar Leaf Financial. Like, he is just this credible Inuk from the north, Harvard grad. He was my predecessor. And when I heard the opportunity came up, I threw my name in the hat right away. And because I'm a huge believer of the importance of entrepreneurs, no matter what your background is. And in Canada, I know there's this budding emergence of Indigenous entrepreneurs. You got to understand that, it wasn't too long ago that First Nations people didn't have the right to vote. Women had the right to vote before we did. We weren't allowed to leave our reserves. We weren't allowed to get an education. My own community in 1958, our land, my dad might have mentioned this to you, Rob. Our reserve was burnt to the ground in 1958 by the government, and we were forcibly removed, and all these atrocities that are happening. But it's business is the equalizer. And it doesn't matter. You're in the trenches together. It doesn't matter the color of your skin or your background. You're doing business together. You're failing together. You're succeeding together, and those relationships carry forward. So I'm really passionate about, as you can probably tell, the Indigenous entrepreneurs. So the opportunity to join the CCIB and to lead that organization for nearly 8 years with the great board of directors was just incredible. I think the proudest one, we developed and started a number of programs there, but the one that really stood out for me and the team, we led the best research in the world, because without solid data, it's hard to make decisions about where you're going to go if you don't have good data to guide you. So that was really impressive what the team was able to do. And then, as well as the procurement targets, we started the supply chain opportunities, procurement champions, and getting the government to commit to a 5% target, getting the economy, the business players at the table to start embracing the way Indigenous entrepreneurs and communities are contributing to the economy. Because it's their business that it's the great equalizer, I think. I know my successor now, Tabitha Bull, continuing. I know she reports to you, Rob. So, she worked I hired her, had her for a year as my chief operating officer, my second in command. And I looked at her, I said, Tabitha, I'm not long for this job for too much longer. And, it's not my decision, but I see you as the next leader. I think she's remarkable. And I know the organization continues to do great work. So, extraordinary time in my life. I hold it near and dear to my heart.
Wow. I don't know where we should start from that. Rob, do you have a specific direction, or should we jump into a hot issue today?
Well, the most recent news, I guess, in the life of JP Gladu is this appointment to the Indigenous Advisory Council that will advise the brand new major projects office and the new initiative of the federal government to try and move select major projects forward faster with meaningful Indigenous participation. And so as part of that new structure, an advisory council has been established with representation, as we've discussed, from First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and JP is on that list. I don't think we've spoken to anybody yet who is on that council, but so let's get into that. JP, what an honor it must have been to be appointed. And how do you see the council? I don't think we've seen terms of reference yet, but what exactly do you see your role and the council's role as?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It was a huge honor. I got a call on a Saturday. Interestingly, my daughter was in town, and we were just getting ready to go out moose hunting, just the father-daughter team again. And I didn't say yes right away, but my inclination was to say yes. I had to, of course, be mindful of conflicts because I'm on the Suncor board, and Pathways Project is one of those projects that have been listed in the 32 so far. And of course, there's many ways to manage the conflict. But I also checked in with my own team at Mokwateh, our firm, and so everybody was like, "Are you crazy? Say yes. This is an incredible opportunity." And I said, "No, I know it's an incredible opportunity. Is this something, that I've got the bandwidth for? Because it's pretty busy. Because you've got to commit, and when you commit, you got to commit. So, my schedule into the future might be shifting a little bit to make room for this important conversation. The idea is to meet with the other 10 Indigenous leaders, and I know about 6 of the others on there, and I know of the others as well." So I've had long-time relationships with these leaders. It was quite striking, actually, when the list did come out after. I said, "You don't know who you're going to the table with." And the list came out, and man, I'm kind of an outlier here because these are strong political leaders, but they're also strong business leaders, which is great. I'm very hopeful. So you're absolutely right, Rob. There isn't a terms of reference that has been developed for this. We're still working through it. I had a great call with Don Farrell, who's the leader, the chair of the CEO of the Major Projects Office. So we had a call the other day. We're really excited about it.
Can you maybe just step back, because all of us associated with Canada are very clear about what's going on, and just again reinforce this came result from Bill C5 and what the Major Projects Office, because you're mentioning the leader of the office is in Calgary, and just step back to set the frame and complement what Rob's already said, because it is important.
It is critically important. We talk about Bill C5, and that's the federal legislation around a one-stop shop, so to speak, on getting major projects developed in Canada, major infrastructure projects. When that came out, First Nations particularly were very concerned about this. The questions around, are they trying to skip around our rights? So everybody from outside of Canada needs to understand our constitutionally protected rights in Section 32 of our Constitution is very strong. We've been fighting for our rights for decades. And, at the end of the day, quite frankly, projects don't get developed in the country without meaningful engagement and participation. And we can get into that, what that looks like with communities. Communities have a strong say in the way that resource development and anything that impacts our lands and our rights get done. So when Bill C5 came out, it was certainly a rocky start. A lot of pushback from communities across the country, but also there are a lot of communities that have seen great success, and we can talk about this as well. Billions of dollars projects have been developed in concert with Indigenous communities, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and those 3 groups make up the Indigenous population in Canada, First Nations being the largest portion of that group, and very strong rights. So there have been multi-billion-dollar deals already done in this country. So we've got many of the ingredients of how this is done. And certainly there are examples, and there are communities that are ready to go now and are excited about this major projects office, which has been established to help set up the thinking, the practices, the relationships, cultural comes to mind as well, on how we're going to succeed together. And so this major projects office, which is held, it's a prime minister appointment, Dawn Farrell, who's an extraordinary leader. Her last big job was the Trans Mountain pipeline, and getting that done with communities. So she's a woman that knows how to get work done. And so this Indigenous Advisory Council is part of the major projects office to help advise her and essentially the prime minister on how to best move forward in establishing projects and getting them done. Again, terms of reference are still coming out, and by no means do we have any decision-making power. Rob, you had mentioned about approving. We don't approve. We're not going to approve. We're not going to veto. We're there to advise. And what I love about this group of leaders is that we all don't think the same. We come from different geographic regions, different socioeconomic backgrounds across this country. Every province and territory, operate a little differently. So it's going to be a colorful conversation. But I know the big brains and with tons of experience at the table are going to be a huge asset to the major projects office to help understand how we're going to move projects forward. And the first 5 have come out to mining. We've got Kitimat 2.0. We've got Darlington SMRs, and then the port in Montreal. So, a great slate of projects. I think these ones have got a lot of support. We're going to weigh in, and we're going to help advise. It's going to be interesting. I will say this as well. Since the appointment got announced last week, my phone has blown up. Emails, calls from chiefs, leaders, allies. And I tell you, it's always the silent majority of nations that are pretty excited about these types of activities. And there's a very vocal minority, I believe, again, this is just my own opinion, that definitely seem to soak up a lot of the oxygen in the room. But both are really important. This is important that we have the discourse as well to make sure that we get things right. So, it's going to be an extraordinary time. It's a 2-year appointment, and I'm grateful to be at the table.
Yeah, my take on the Indigenous community's reaction is very similar, JP. There's some valid concerns about process and how the initiative was kicked off, but the business people and the people I speak to within Indigenous communities want to get on with testing this new initiative and testing whether the government is genuine about their intentions. And what I've said to people is, even if there were flaws in the process, even if the legislation could have been more explicit or better, the fact is Indigenous people have so much leverage now. These projects cannot get done in our territories without a meaningful involvement. And so we've got an opportunity to shape what that involvement looks like now.
Yeah, and if I can build on that involvement, it's incredible. In Canada, in the last, I guess Ontario had a loan guarantee for the energy programs years ago, but it wasn't very well known and well accessed. They've since bolstered that program, but the one that's been most successful in the country now is the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corp, run by my friend Chana. And, Chana is a great leader, and, hundreds of millions of dollars have been allocated to nations to be part of major projects. Then it's extraordinary. Now the federal government has a $10 billion loan guarantee program to support Indigenous communities' equity in projects. It's sometimes said, equity is to date is the purest form of consent. And I know it's a little bit of a controversial statement, but I believe that, if communities are going to buy into projects, it is a strong statement saying, okay, we're going to buy in, but it doesn't negate the really important part about looking after the land as we develop. I told you my background. Like I tell you, if somebody wants to mess around with my moose hunting areas or territories that are important to our elders, we're going to be in for a fight. And it's just, we're not going to give up our thousands of years of knowledge and experience and importance and connection to the land. But that doesn't mean that we can't go ahead and develop parts of the land as well. We've got hydro facility projects in my communities. We've got forestry. We manage 100% of the forest. We've got biogasification projects. There's more energy projects, dams coming. We're open to those opportunities. But the other thing, like what this looks like, is how many jobs are we? What kind of training activities? What are the procurement opportunities? Back to the importance of supply chain and Indigenous entrepreneurs, and that. What are we going to do to empower our communities? Because we're not going to sit on the outside anymore. Long gone are the days that a company is going to come in, engineer the heck out of a project, come and go, what do you think, First Nations? We're going to say out the back door, you did not consult us. You did not engage us at the beginning. You have no idea if this makes sense to our community. So get out of here. But if they're going to come to the table at the front end, and that's a big part of this process, to go, let's figure this out together. How do you want to participate? And so the shaping of our future now is inclusive of Indigenous people, and that excites me.
So do you think with the Major Projects Office, and the first 5 projects have been announced, they're more than shovel ready? Some are, well on their way. Is it giving a focus on these big projects? Because whether the Major Projects Office is set up or not, the Indigenous people have their rights, and how you've articulated want to develop is going to happen. What is the benefit for the First Nations and the Inuit and the Métis with this focus on these big projects for the country?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it doesn't matter what we talk about as human beings. If we don't see ourselves in an environment, we're going to be very cautious to approach, because we don't know if it's possible, because it hasn't been achieved yet. And so it's hard to understand how to create those opportunities without seeing ourselves there. In Canada, there are many opportunities or success examples where First Nations, Métis, and Inuit are fully in the mix. Owning projects, land oversight, jobs, strong procurement, billions of dollars being spent on Indigenous entrepreneurs. And so having these projects that are more shovel ready than others to inspire Indigenous communities to go, hey, we are at the table and we are benefiting. That's really important. Like, let me take Enbridge for an example. Like, I can't say enough great things about what they've been achieving lately, both in Alberta with the 24 nations and Métis 26 nations in Alberta on a $1 billion+ project. Now, mind you, the infrastructure was already in place, but it shows the willingness of Enbridge to walk the talk. And the most recent one, the 37 nations in Alberta, pre-existing, but also future opportunities for ownership and infrastructure, again, shows that this is possible. And to get 37, I believe it's 37 First Nations on the table with a pipeline in BC, I mean, that's incredible. So we need to be able to showcase these opportunities. Or, Chief Terrence Paul's on this advisory committee as well. And I've known the chief for many years. We celebrate him at CCAB, and an extraordinary leader. Canadians and I hope folks over the pond as well in Europe understand that just because First Nations people are going to start asserting our rights into major projects and the way that we do development on the land, it doesn't mean that things are going to stop. It actually means we're going to do things better. It actually means that we're going to have better land oversight, because these are our territories. We're going to make sure it's done to the highest standards. We're going to try to protect our water as much as we possibly can, and the lands and the air. So we need to create that space and place where this is possible. And it is possible because we've done it. We just need more of it, and we need to get better at it.
Hear, hear. We've talked about some of your board roles and advisory committee roles, but so what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Tell us a little bit about your Mokwateh consulting.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Well, it was interesting. I think I shared the story with you. When I left CCAB, the Canadian Council for what's now known as Indigenous Business, my good friends Dave and Nicole Boucher, who are an incredible power couple in Northern Alberta, they're in the oil site services. At the time, they offered me their CEO role for a family business. At the time, it was a $150 million company, over 1,000 employees, and I was really excited about it. It was March 2020, and we know what was going on. Oil tanked and COVID exploded, and Nicole and I had to have the tough conversation about not being able to take me on because they were laying off 500 people the next Monday. It was a tough time for me, as you might imagine. All of a sudden, I've got no job. My apartment was packed up, and I had nowhere to live, and I had a little suitcase to my name going, holy smokes, what am I going to do now? It was also a time to kind of reset what I wanted to do next. And so, the Suncor board came calling, and a few other passion projects started coming. And so, this is great. Maybe I'll set up my own firm. It was just a sole proprietorship at the time. And then my longtime friend and who I worked with at CCAB, so let's start a company. Like, let's incorporate your company. And I said, Max Goudreau is our managing partner. I said, careful what you ask for, because I've been saying no to a lot of things. I have a nice, comfortable life balance right now. And I didn't listen, and he didn't listen. Now we are in 3.5 years since we've incorporated. A Mokwateh means bear heart, my Indigenous name. We've had over 100 clients. We've got over 25 people in our organization across the country. We do global work, and it's been a remarkable journey so far. We've got a great team across the country. We're working in pretty much every sector that you can think of, from mining, oil, gas, forestry, finance, Toronto Pearson Airport. We even did some work for A&W, and I tried to negotiate a lifetime supply of Teen Burgers, but they wouldn't go for that.
Oh, that's too bad. I would have liked to hear about that. Yeah, A&W can't beat it.
But the roles that I've got right now, it keeps me pretty busy, and that's why Max is the managing partner, and we're growing the company. But my board roles at the Institute for Corporate Director, Superior Suncor, and then I'm advising BHP and Domtar, and now the Major Projects Office. Doesn't leave me a whole lot of time to really dig in too deep. But I do have line of sight on our big projects in Mokwateh, one of our big clients right now, Farm Credit Canada. Great people in Saskatchewan, looking to help Indigenous communities across the country. And I really love that project. I know the team's doing great work on it, and I love being a part of that. And, we help facilitate and support events. So our Spark event in Calgary, it's a Tena First Nation in November. So it's the first inaugural. We're hosting that event. We'd love to have you guys there. Come check it out. We've got, Rich Kruger, CEO of Suncor. We've got Goldie Hyder. We've got the ask out to Minister Hodgson and others. We hope that they're able to come, but it's a great list. So it's about convening leadership. It's about convening ideas. It's about convening practices to go forward, because now, as you get the sense, now is a time, like the change that's happened in the last 10 years has been extraordinary. The next 10 years are going to be monumental. It is shifting so fast, and we don't have a lot of time as a country to get it right. And so all hands on deck.
Yes, very well articulated. I think there is a huge challenge. What do you say for Canada, Indigenous and non-Indigenous? What do you say to foreign investors? Because their perception of the world, all our perceptions, the world we knew is no longer exists, right? We're now on our way, something new. Where do you see Canada in this new future of the Western Alliance, of what remains with it, or like-minded countries?
That's a great question. It's a big question. I was part of the very first group to go over to the UK with Chief Derek Epp, Chief David Jimmy, myself, and a couple of other leaders.
I remember that occasion well.
It was great. It was the first time that an Indigenous-led group came to the UK to talk to investors in the mining and the miners. And it goes back to my thoughts on data. You have to have the most current, robust data so that you can make decisions, because remember the line the other morning, capital is lazy. Capital doesn't want uncertainty. Capital wants strong returns with certainty. That's what investors are looking for. And so you need to connect with Indigenous communities, and thank you very much for having me on your show here to help communicate some of the opportunities and challenges to your investors. In Canada, we are at a turning point, I believe. We're at this inflection point where the Indigenous nations, and I think industry gets it, government gets it, where in the past, let me just kind of paint the picture before, where government was very paternalistic. We know best for First Nations. That's gone out the door. Where industry builds projects without us, that's gone out the door. Where have still some trust issues. There's a saying, building business at the speed of trust here with nations, with First Nations, because our immediate reaction to many things is to just go, no, stop. That's starting to shift. We've bitten into every green apple and it's been sour. Now we're starting to we've got to kind of put that mindset, okay, this next apple we're going to bite into is green, but it's going to be a sweet one. And so when we come to the table now as a country, the mindset has to shift. Governments need to see, and they are, I believe, the federal government starting to see our First Nations as nations. So these are government to government and how we're going to exist together. Industry knows now most that they've got to work with our nations and our companies to help build projects, or they don't get done. I mean, Rob, you conceded that as well. Not that conceded is not the right word, but you fully understand that. And then nations, again, we've got to come to the table with a new mindset and that's the importance of why having these success projects in the past and where we are now, so that we can see that next apple we bite into is going to be a sweet one. And so to your investors, we're at that precipice now. I think Canadians, that tripartite, the government, industry, and First Nations and in Indigenous communities understand the environment shifted, and we've got to get this done. There's no more guessing anymore. We know what the challenge is, and now we've got to apply our best people and knowledge and practice to get her done.
It's a very important point to make, especially to international investors or potential joint venture partners who may have had some experience in the past trying to get things done in Canada, and to have a perception that Indigenous people are against all development, and so you can't get things done in Canada. And for those who aren't as in tune with the changes over the last 5 to 10 years in Canada, I think they would be shocked at how the landscape has changed, and you've described it well. Things are getting done now. There's some great success stories to point to. We do the annual investment summit focused on Canadian projects with Indigenous people, and try to highlight some of those investment opportunities, as well as to guide investors about how to go about engaging and getting involved.
Absolutely.
JP, absolutely wonderful to have another in-depth conversation with you. Appreciate the perspective you bring as a business leader, as well as an Indigenous leader, and your comments on the future of the country and the potential it offers for all Canadians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, and JP, just echo that. Always a pleasure to catch up with you and get your insights and thoughts. So really enjoyed our conversation. Niall and Goa for taking the time.
Miigwech, I really appreciate the opportunity, guys. And to any of your subscribers, please don't be shy. Reach out to Canadian Indigenous leaders to learn more. And absolutely, there's a great event coming up in the spring next year. I'm going to be there. So engage with us. Don't be afraid to get your information right from the source. Canadian government will give you one view, and industry will give you another. But again, good data helps you make good decisions. So don't be afraid to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you to JP Gladu for sharing his insights with us, and thank you for viewing and listening. Mark your calendars for the upcoming 2026 summit taking place on the 8th of April. Be sure to share, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast channel. Thanks for listening to Drumbeats. Until next time.